Welcome to Loveworld USA News. I'm TGK Andre. First, let's take a quick look at the top stories this evening. Appeals Court blocks appointment of Alina Habba as New Jersey's U.S. Attorney. Key evidence challenged as Mangione returns to court in high-profile CEO murder case. The Trump administration tightens SNAP work rules. President Donald Trump commutes sentence of executive convicted in investor fraud case. And US-UK strike tariff-free pharma deal after pressure from President Donald Trump. And now to the news. A federal appeals court has upheld a ruling disqualifying President Donald Trump's nominee, Alina Habba, from serving as U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. The Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found that her installation violated the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, affirming a lower court's determination that the administration's workaround to place her on the job was not lawful. President Donald Trump nominated Habba to the post earlier this year, but the Senate did not confirm her. After district court judges refused to appoint her, the administration withdrew her nomination and reassigned her to a lower role that would make her the acting U.S. Attorney. Judges called the maneuver an unprecedented personnel tactic, and the appellate panel agreed, ruling that the Vacancies Act barred someone nominated for the same office from serving in an acting capacity. The three-judge panel said Habba cannot automatically assume the position because only the first assistant in place at the time of a vacancy qualifies under the law. The court added that the Attorney General cannot circumvent the statute by delegating full prosecutorial authority to her, a move it said violated the exclusivity provisions of the Vacancies Act. The decision is expected to have national implications, as other interim prosecutors were appointed through similar methods. The ruling comes shortly after another court blocked the administration's chosen prosecutor in Virginia, marking a series of legal setbacks for President Donald Trump's efforts to install his preferred candidates in key federal posts. Supporters argue the judiciary is resisting needed changes to the Justice Department, while critics claim the administration has pushed legal boundaries to place loyalists in top roles. Watch this.
Habba previously served as one of President Donald Trump's personal lawyers, and the president nominated her to this role. She was not confirmed by the Senate, so the Trump administration attempted to install her another way. A district court found that the appointment violated a federal act, and the Third Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that decision this morning. This could end up in the Supreme Court. And remember, in recent weeks, we saw something very similar with Lindsey Halligan, who was appointed in the Eastern District of Virginia. Still no response yet from Habba or the Trump administration.
1 year after the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, accused shooter Luigi Mangione returned to Manhattan Supreme Court for a pivotal pretrial hearing. Prosecutors aim to solidify their case with surveillance images, video of the shooting, and items recovered during Mangione's arrest, while the defense seeks to suppress much of that evidence as unconstitutional. The hearing will determine what prosecutors can present when the case goes to trial. Images shown in court allegedly depict Mangione tracking Thompson across Midtown, then firing multiple shots before walking away. Prosecutors also presented surveillance from a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, where police confronted and arrested Mangione 5 days after the killing. Defense attorneys argue Altoona officers violated Mangione's rights by questioning him for 20 minutes before issuing Miranda warnings and by performing a warrantless search of his backpack, where police say they found a 3D printed gun, a silencer, and alleged journal writings describing a motive tied to insurance. The defense is asking the judge to exclude all backpack contents and any statements Mangione made to police, asserting the evidence is fruit of an illegal search and interrogation. Prosecutors countered that the arrest and search were lawful, and that the items would have been discovered regardless during the normal discovery process, and emphasized the surveillance video as clear proof of guilt. The hearing follows a recent defense win in which 2 terrorism-related murder charges were dismissed. Mangione still faces second-degree murder in state court, as well as a federal case where he could face a death penalty. Conservatives observing the case note that increasing crime in Democrat-run cities like New York remains a pressing public safety issue, a theme frequently highlighted by President Donald Trump, while the legal battles continue over whether the most critical evidence will be allowed at trial. Watch this.
Nearly 1 year after accused killer Luigi Mangione allegedly took his fatal shot, he's heading back to court ahead of what could be one of the most closely watched trials in decades. So closely watched that even a routine pretrial hearing is capturing attention. At the center of it, evidence from the moments he was captured inside a Pennsylvania McDonald's. The defense team arguing that Mangione was not read his Miranda rights right away, and that anything police learned in the roughly 17 minutes before then should not be allowed in court. They're also arguing that the evidence collected from his backpack, including what police describe as a 3D printed gun and a so-called manifesto, should be thrown out, since police didn't have a search warrant.
The Trump administration's new rules for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program took effect Monday. Adults up to age 64 must now work, train, or volunteer at least 80 hours per month to qualify. The rules apply to new applicants and those up for recertification. The changes are projected to reduce SNAP enrollment by about 2.4 million people over the next decade, potentially saving taxpayers billions. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins highlighted widespread misuse, including deceased individuals still receiving benefits and people collecting assistance in multiple states. All participants must now reapply for benefits. The administration is also blocking illegal immigrants from accessing federal programs, including tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent emphasized that benefits will be preserved for U.S. citizens. Supporters say the reforms restore accountability and cut fraud in the program. They argue the changes ensure aid goes to Americans who genuinely need it, rather than being misused or handed out without oversight. Let's take a look.
18 years old will now have to follow a 20-hour-a-week or 80-hour-a-month work requirement, which includes either a job or participation in a job training program or volunteer program. Those who don't follow the requirements will be limited to 3 months of SNAP benefits over the course of a 3-year period. According to the USDA, the new restrictions would also remove exemptions for people experiencing homelessness, veterans, and young adults aging out of the foster care system. The work requirement changes come as part of Trump administration's Big Beautiful Bill, which was signed into law in July and aims at tightening requirements for people who do receive SNAP benefits. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this work requirement change could impact about 1.1 million people over the next 9 years nationwide. Here in Orange County, 310,000 people rely on SNAP benefits. This could impact about 42,000 people.
President Donald Trump has commuted the prison sentence of former GPB Capital founder David Gentile, who had only recently begun serving a 7-year term for securities and wire fraud. Federal prison records show Gentile was released on Wednesday, less than 2 weeks after reporting to custody. Gentile was convicted in what prosecutors under the prior administration described as a large-scale scheme involving more than 10,000 investors, though the Trump White House say key facts were distorted by the Biden-era Department of Justice. Gentile's co-defendant, Jeffrey Schneider, is serving a 6-year sentence and remains in prison. Prosecutors had claimed GBP Capital misled investors and used new investors' funds to pay others, characterizing it as a Ponzi scheme. But White House officials now argue that investors were explicitly told how distributions could be funded, and that Biden-era prosecutors misrepresented the nature of the case while allegedly relying on false testimony, issues President Donald Trump has pointed to in several recent commutations involving questionable federal prosecutions. The commutation does not erase Gentile's conviction or other penalties, but it reflects President Donald Trump's continued willingness to scrutinize DOJ actions from the previous administration, particularly in white-collar cases where prosecutorial overreach has been alleged. The White House says the case exemplifies the need for transparency and fairness, especially after repeated concerns over politically motivated charging decisions during President Joe Biden's tenure. In a second term, President Donald Trump has issued several pardons and commutations to individuals convicted of various financial crimes, including securities, tax, and healthcare fraud. Supporters say he is correcting injustices and reining in an overly aggressive federal bureaucracy, while critics argue the move favors white-collar offenders. The action comes as the administration continues to evaluate other prosecutions it believes may have been mishandled before Trump returned to office. Let's take a look.
And then in the interest of transparency, does the White House support releasing the Department of Defense's video of those September 2nd strikes on those military boats? And also, separate topic on presidential pardon power. Why did the president commute the sentence of David Gentile recently? He was a private equity executive. He served 12 days out of a 7-year sentence. Prosecutors said he defrauded $1.6 billion with thousands of victims, including veterans, farmers, teachers. Why was he pardoned?
To your first question, that's definitely not a decision for me to make. I would defer you to the Department of War. It's also probably a decision for the president himself to make. As for your second question with respect to that pardon, he issued a commutation for Mr. Gentile, who's the former CEO and co-founder of GBP Capital Holdings. Unlike similar companies, GBP paid regular annualized distributions to its investors. In 2015, GBP disclosed to investors the possibility of using investor capital to pay some of these distributions rather than funding them from current operations. Even though this was disclosed to investors, the Biden Department of Justice claimed it was a Ponzi scheme.
The news will be back after this break. Don't go anywhere.
In a world that's always moving, staying connected to the right resources makes all the difference. Welcome to the Loveworld App Store, the digital home of everything that powers your journey in the Loveworld nation. Here, discovery is simple and meaningful. With our categories section, you can explore a wide range of apps designed to enrich your spirit.
I'm praying especially for you. You that have been sick. You need a miracle.
On the Loveworld App Store, you can access all your favorite apps, such as Healing School app, King's Chat, PCDL, Rhapsody app, Love Tunes, ESPYs, Loveworld Worship, Herald app, Alpha TV, King's View, C-Flix, Hello Loveworld, PCDL for Kids, King's Conference, and so much more. Each application is created to serve a unique purpose and bring you closer to a life of impact. Explore My App feature, where your most valued tools are gathered in one convenient place. It's your personalized hub, ready whenever you are. The Loveworld App Store is more than a collection of apps. It's a vibrant ecosystem built to inspire faith, foster connection, and equip you for impact. Visit www.lwappstore.com to download the app on your device. Explore a world where purpose meets technology. Loveworld App Store. All your world in one place.
Welcome back. The United States and the United Kingdom have finalized a major agreement that will keep tariffs on UK-made pharmaceuticals at zero for the next 3 years, securing one of Britain's most valuable export sectors after months of tense negotiations. The deal follows repeated warnings from President Donald Trump, who threatened tariffs of up to 100% on branded drug imports unless other nations increase what they pay for medicines. Under the agreement, the UK will raise the price threshold used to determine whether new drugs are too expensive for the NHS by 25%, and will commit to increasing its overall spending on medicines from 0.3% to 0.6% of GDP over the next decade. The move marks the first time in more than 20 years that the NHS will formally increase what it pays for pharmaceuticals, a shift long resisted by British health officials but strongly encouraged by the White House. In exchange, the US guarantees tariff-free entry for UK pharmaceutical exports, a sector worth more than £11 billion annually. British leaders framed the deal as essential for protecting jobs and stabilizing a domestic industry facing pressure after several major companies, including GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, and AstraZeneca, shifted billions in planned investment to the United States. Business and Trade Secretary Peter Kyle called the agreement a real win that secures market access while slowing the exodus of pharmaceutical development from the UK. The White House echoed that message, saying the arrangement forces wealthy nations to pay their fair share instead of relying on inflated US prices to subsidize global drug costs. While the deal is being celebrated by industry figures and trade officials, critics warn the NHS will bear billions in new costs at a time when budgets are already strained. Health analysts estimate the policy shift could add up to £3 billion in annual drug spending, money they argue would be better directed toward core services like GP access or reducing hospital backlogs. Still, supporters note that President Donald Trump has long demanded trading partners shoulder more of the burden for advanced medicines, and say the agreement reflects a broader recalibration of global pharmaceutical pricing that aligns with his priorities. The Transportation Security Administration will begin charging travelers a $45 fee if they arrive at airport checkpoints without a real ID or passport. The agency said the fee, taking effect February 1st, is part of the next phase of Real ID enforcement and will fund a biometric or biographic identity verification process for travelers lacking compliant identification. According to TSA officials, the increased fee, up from a previously proposed $18, will help cover administrative and technology costs without shifting the burden to taxpayers. Travelers must complete an online verification process before approaching security, and TSA cautioned that verification does not guarantee clearance if identity cannot be confirmed. Passengers who reach the checkpoint without acceptable ID will be directed out of line to complete the online steps and pay the fee. Their verification will remain valid for up to 10 days, after which any traveler without a real ID or passport must pay again. Fees will also apply to those whose real ID or passport is lost or stolen. TSA reports that roughly 94% of travelers already present a real ID or other approved identification. The policy coincides with continued national discussions on federal identification standards and increased scrutiny of border and security systems emphasized by conservative leaders, including President Donald Trump. Watch this.
Beginning February 1st, at airports nationwide, it might cost you an extra $45 to fly without a real ID. TSA now bumping the cost up after announcing last week it would cost travelers $18.
The fee was necessary because we needed to modernize the system. We needed to make sure that the system is safe.
Flyers without a real ID can pay the fee online before arriving at TSA checkpoints. They'll get an email to present to the TSA officer.
So if you get to the airport and you don't have a real ID or another acceptable form of ID and you haven't gone through the online verification process and you happen to make it all the way to the TSA checkpoint there, they may pull you out of line and go through a verification process that could take up to 30 minutes and cost you $45.
Elon Musk is warning that the United States' more than $38 trillion national debt cannot be solved through conventional economic policy, arguing instead that only rapid advances in artificial intelligence and robotics can offset the nation's soaring interest payments. In a podcast interview released Sunday, Musk said American debt levels are now so high that interest costs alone exceed the entire U.S. military budget, a situation he called insanely unsustainable. Musk argued that AI-driven productivity gains must far outpace the growth of the money supply to counter inflation and eventually push the country towards deflation. He predicted that within 3 years, output from AI and robotics would grow faster than federal spending and money creation, a shift he said is necessary to prevent the debt from spiraling further. According to Musk, once machines can produce goods, services, and even their own components at massive scale, the traditional monetary system itself could begin to weaken. The Tesla CEO also said the current inflation remains elevated because AI has not yet boosted output enough to overcome large annual deficits of roughly $2 trillion. But he believes that is about to change rapidly as AI and robotics remake the economy and ultimately transform how nations measure productivity, money, and even national economic systems. Although Musk framed his predictions as observations rather than policy prescriptions, his comments add to the growing debate in Washington, especially under President Donald Trump's renewed focus on spending and economic competitiveness. About how America will confront its mounting debt load in the years ahead. Watch this.
The U.S. debt crisis, because currently the U.S. debt is insanely high, and the interest payments on the debt exceed the entire military budget of the United States. Just the interest payments, and that's at least in the short term going to continue to increase. So I think actually the only thing that can solve for the debt situation is AI and robotics, but it will more than. It might cause. I guess it probably would cause significant deflation.
The news continues after this break. Stay with us.
It's easy to set up, quick to start, and packed with value. Smarter streaming starts here with the Alpha TV Stick. Just plug and stream anytime, anywhere. Discover a curated lineup of content designed to inspire, live broadcasts and global events, inspirational films and series, children's programming, healing and teaching sessions, all on demand. With millions of downloads worldwide, the Alpha TV app is transforming lives across the globe. And now, we're on a mission to reach 1 billion downloads of the Alpha TV app, and you can be part of it. Join the global wave with 1 billion Alpha TV app downloads worldwide. Bring the higher life into every home. Order your Alpha TV stick today and experience smarter streaming. Alpha, the higher life is here.
NATO officials are signaling a potential shift toward a more forceful strategy as Russia escalates its hybrid attacks across Europe, including cyber intrusions, disinformation campaigns, and pressure on allied borders. Leaders within the alliance say Moscow's tactics have become increasingly brazen, prompting calls for a stronger coordinated response to protect member nations. Diplomats say NATO is reviewing options ranging from enhanced cyber defense operations to more visible military deterrence measures in Eastern Europe. Several member states argue that Russia's destabilizing tactics, carried out without triggering a traditional military confrontation, require updated rules of engagement. Intelligence reports circulating among NATO partners warn that Russia is relying on covert operations precisely because they fall below the threshold that historically triggers a collective response. The push for a tougher posture comes as European governments continue facing domestic strains from migration surges, energy concerns, and cyber attacks widely attributed to Russian-backed actors. Conservative officials across the alliance have urged NATO to stop treating these actions as isolated incidents and instead recognize them as a coordinated strategy to weaken Western institutions. Many also argue that years of hesitant responses have emboldened Moscow's behavior. Supporters of a firmer approach note that President Donald Trump long pressed NATO allies to increase defense spending and strengthen deterrence against Russia. Warnings that some European leaders dismissed at the time but now acknowledge were prescient. As the alliance debates next steps, NATO ministers are expected to present formal recommendations early next year, signaling that the era of tolerance for Russia's hybrid provocations may be coming to an end. Japan's Princess Aiko turned 24 on Monday amid growing public calls to allow a female emperor, as concern deepens over the future of the country's shrinking imperial family. The only child of Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako has become one of the most popular royals, often drawing louder cheers on her parents during public appearances, including recent visits to Nagasaki and Okinawa. Many supporters say they want to see her become a future monarch, something that is currently impossible under Japan's male-only succession rules. Aiko's growing profile has energized activists, commentators, and ordinary citizens who argue that the succession law must be changed before the monarchy runs out of heirs. Supporters have launched YouTube channels, social media campaigns, and even manga-style books urging lawmakers to open the throne to the emperor's first child, regardless of gender. They say Aiko's elevation would both secure the long-term stability of the monarchy and send a powerful message about women's status in Japanese society. Under the post-war imperial house law, only men in the paternal line can inherit the throne, and princesses lose their royal status if they marry commoners. As a result, the imperial family has shrunk from about 30 members 3 decades ago to just 16 today, all adults. The line of succession now effectively rests on Crown Prince Akishino, his 19-year-old son Prince Hisahito, and a few elderly male relatives, a situation some scholars describe as critical for an institution said to date back more than a millennium. Japan has had 8 reigning empresses in its history, but legal restrictions introduced in the late 19th century and carried into the current law have locked in male-only succession. A government panel in 2005 briefly considered the option of allowing a woman to ascend the throne, but the idea was dropped after Hisahito's birth. More recent proposals from conservative experts focus on preserving the male line, including by adopting men from former aristocratic branches, moves critics say are unrealistic and out of step with public opinion that increasingly favors Princess Aiko as a legitimate future emperor. Let's take a look.
Princess Aiko's increasing popularity is sparking discussions about changing Japan's male-only succession law. Aiko is the only child of Emperor Naruhito and cannot succeed him under the law. Experts say lifting the female ban is crucial to the monarchy's future, but conservative lawmakers oppose it. The monarchy has only one eligible heir from the younger generation. Aiko turned 24 on Monday, and her admirers are wishing for her to become a future monarch.
できたら愛子様が今知識も広くお持ちだからなられたらとかもういつも言ってます。もうすべてですね。皆さんに対しての笑顔ですかね。あれです。ものすごく救われますね。いろんなことで。
The monarchy.
Just before we end the news, let's take a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Appeals court blocks appointment of Alina Habba as New Jersey's U.S. attorney. Key evidence challenged as Mangione returns to court in high-profile CEO murder case. The Trump administration tightens SNAP work rules. President Donald Trump commutes sentence of executive convicted in investor fraud case. And the US and UK strike tariff-free pharma deal after pressure from President Donald Trump. And that's the news for today. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I'm TGK Andre. Good night, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.